We see the COVID numbers, and we see the reality, and we know what we have to do. We need a different approach. And the approach has to be community-based organizations who can have conversations in the community with people who know them, who culturally know them, who know their issues and their fears, and it almost has to be a one-on-one conversation. We're not just going to sit there and let it happen to us. We see the problem coming. We see the cloud on the horizon. We see where it's moving. Let's get to work together as New Yorkers, recognize our individual responsibility, and get this job done. That's what I mean by New York tough.
Governor, why are you calling the independent investigators?
Excuse me, you asked.
I know, why are you calling the independent investigators unreliable? What's the evidence?
Look at who the independent investigators are.
They've been widely supported by you and many of your supporters and experts in the state.
Do a little history.
I have done the history.
Go to Google. Google the independent reviewers and tell me.
Can you provide the evidence,
yes,
Governor?
Do you think that the Assembly should only consider articles of impeachment based solely on the AG report?
The Assembly will consider, the Assembly investigation is broader and has a broader mandate and is independent.
Governor, you've maintained through all of this you can keep leading the state. We haven't seen you in 10 days as Delta has spiked. How do you reassure New Yorkers you won't go dark every time there's a major development in the AG's investigation?
Because I never go dark. That was said just before we were about to do the state budget, right? You had some elected officials say, oh, he's not going to be able to get the budget done because he's going to be distracted. We got the budget done. We got the budget done on time. And we've done phenomenal work every day since. And COVID, we are 100% on top of COVID. Now, COVID has been in a different place, obviously, than it was. And as you also know, COVID now, the state role has changed on COVID, right? You're aware of that? You're aware of the new legislation? Yeah, I don't think you are. The state was in charge of all COVID decisions, and which meant we made decisions for every locality in the state. That has now changed because COVID came down, the emergency abated, and we said give the authority back to the localities. So now you have localities making decisions on COVID. So New York City will decide, Nassau will decide, Suffolk will decide, Westchester decides. So they're making decisions on the day-to-day management of COVID. I will say this to the localities. I think they should be taking this very seriously. I think this spike in numbers is alarming. I think when you talk about employees who work for government, who are public-facing, that we should be taking precautions. You know you have government employees who interact with the public all the time. One person who is infected can see 50 people, 100 people a day in these communities. Hispanic Federation, Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies, the New York Immigration Coalition, the Asian American Federation, the Charles B. Wang Community Center, APICA Community Health. They are going to organize to get into these communities door to door and have these conversations with people in the community to get those numbers up. We don't know the long-term consequences of the vaccine. We don't know what's going to happen a year or 2 or 3 or 4 down the road. Yeah, but you don't know what's going to happen on the long-term consequences of COVID either, do you? And you know that there's information about what they call long-haul syndrome. People who get COVID and they don't just get better in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And they have lingering symptoms. And nobody can tell you that COVID in 2 years, in 3 years, in 4 years inside the body isn't going to come back as something else.